Hi, my name is Casey Wofford, and I am the confidential advocate with the Relationship Violence and Sexual Assault Prevention Program. And today for our Relational Development Group, which is one of the services that we provide, we are going to be talking about the power of giving a positive no to somebody. My pronouns are she, her, and hers, and I'm going to start off with first talking about RVSP and what our services are, and then we will dive right into it. I do want to say that this presentation is based off of the book, The Power of a Positive No. I just finished reading it. It was truly a very good book, and I think just even with the times of, unfortunately, our country seems pretty divided in a lot of ways right now, whether you're talking about the racial injustices, social injustices, and people's opinions of that, which, by the way, we absolutely support Black Lives Matter. And in order to end sexual violence, you have to end all forms of violence and all forms of oppression. Or if you're talking about responses to COVID-19, people, whether or not to wear a mask, people just seem more divided than ever in some ways, or at least more vocal about it. And maybe part of that comes from the ability to be behind a keyboard and sharing more opinions, not face to face. But we can all do a better job of coming from a place of curiosity, of coming from a place where we are respecting our boundaries and our limits, as well as respecting others. And it wasn't that long ago I was having a conversation with a friend, and we were talking about how with COVID-19, it feels like when you say no to somebody, whether it be they want to hang out and you're not comfortable doing that, whether it be they want to FaceTime and you're just not in the mood, it feels like there's less excuses to come up with when saying no or giving a no, because people are like, well, what else could you be doing? We're all stuck at home. And, we were talking about how you should be able to say no and kind of just say no with grace, and no be accepted with grace. And that's not how it usually feels. And so I think it's really important that we talk about how to say no, why we don't say no, and how we feel when we do say no, and how we feel when we do say yes. And so that was the reasoning behind why I wanted to have this conversation today. So first, just a little bit about RVSP. Clicker, if my clicker works. There we go. Okay, so RVSP, the Relationship Violence and Sexual Assault Prevention Program, we provide education, support, and advocacy. So this is a piece of our educational component. We are a prevention program, and so while we support and advocacy are absolutely two of our biggest pillars, and we are doing those all the time. So we support students whenever they reach out, if they're having any relationship problems, or if they've been impacted by sexual violence in any way. We are here to be a support for them. We're here to give them power and control over their own healing and make sure that they know all of their rights and all of their options. And so that's a huge piece of what I do. Safety planning, if somebody needs emergency housing, if someone needs academic accommodations, if somebody decides that they want to report through Title IX or to the police, we're here to explore all of those options for somebody. But another big part of what we do, which is essential for ending sexual violence, is the prevention work. And sometimes it can feel hard to figure out, okay, well, where do we start? How do we prevent sexual violence from ever occurring, or relationship violence? And a big part of that is understanding how to communicate in a nonviolent way. It's understanding what a toxic relationship is versus what it isn't. I think it's really easy. We can all easily say, hitting somebody is never okay. Raping somebody is never okay. That stuff is so clear, right? You can talk to anybody about that and just completely agree and move on to talk about whatever else. But then when it comes to watching television and seeing how people are communicating We see toxic relationships play out on television all of the time, and we're exposed to it all of the time when we are watching or consuming our media. And when we're doing that, we don't typically identify things as still being violent. And we don't do that because it's so normalized within our culture, because we do live in a culture that promotes violence. We do live in a rape culture. And so where to start can be really focusing on how do we communicate with each other in a healthy way. And again, that's why we have this group to talk about how do we have healthy relationships. And that's why today we're talking about how do we say no in a way that respects our limits. So how do we say a positive no? So I ask that if you are watching this, that you get a piece of paper or a little journal and a pen to participate. And I want you to first think about, why is saying no such an important skill? And I want you to go ahead and write that question down on your piece of paper, and then go ahead and take notes as to why is it important. And then just pause this. And when you're ready, go ahead and resume it. And I'm going to go ahead and move forward as you do that. So for why it's important to develop saying no as a skill, we are in the knowledge and information age, with access to the internet, with access to social media, with access to dating apps. We are making more choices than we ever have before as a society. We make decisions on what to say no to so often throughout the day that, we're not even consciously aware of it. So let's say your alarm goes off in the morning. You make a decision whether you're going to get up. You make a decision to say, yes, I'm ready to start my day, or you make a decision to say, no, I'm going to hit the snooze and I'm going to just keep sleeping this one out. I make that no decision quite a few more times than I probably should, but I'm not going to shit on myself. It's okay. Like, that's just what I do. It's part of my habit. But like, even from then, it's not like when I wake up, I'm like, oh, this is a decision I'm making. I'm either choosing to say yes or no. Like, I'm already making decisions to say no to start my day that I'm not even thinking of in that way. And then throughout the day, like, we make decisions of, am I going to attend this meeting? Am I going to attend this webinar right now? Am I going to talk to my family today? Talk to my friends today? And that's just like basics. Then on top of that, when people actually make requests of us, that's no on a completely different level. And that's what we're really going to be focusing on today. But just be aware, like, we are saying no or yes all the time throughout the day. And the reason why it's so important to develop the skill of saying no is because we want to align, what our actions are with our values, with what we think, what we believe, and what's going on in our hearts. The more that we align all of those things, the closer we become to what a lot of people in human psychology would say, they call it self-actualization. If you've seen Maslow's hierarchy before, you'll see self-actualization at the top of that. And basically, what self-actualization is living your most genuine life, aligning who you want to be exposed to the world with who you are inside, and aligning those things together so that you can act in an authentic and genuine way more times than not. And what that requires us to do is be able to sit with ourselves, just in a silent way, and figure out what are our interests, what are our values and our underlying needs. And the more that we know who we are, what our interests are, what we want from life, the more we're going to be able to stand strong with what we say no to, because we're saying yes to ourselves and what our values are. And so now I know that you had your piece of paper, hopefully, that you wrote down, like, why is it important to say no? And now what I want you to do is think about, how do you feel when you say yes to something that you don't want to do, or something that you don't agree with. Even how do you feel when you're silent, when someone says something around you that you don't agree with or that you don't stand up to. In our case, just speaking more from like the RBSP perspective, I know that I have had times in the past when I have not stood up to a social injustice in the moment, and I think that's something that I could easily feel shame for, and it's also something that is normal. It happens to everybody. We all have opportunities that, maybe we don't take, or we stay silent in the moment. But we also have the opportunity to grow from those moments and figure out how do we stand up in the future. So go ahead and write down just what are the feelings that go through your mind, through your heart, whenever you say yes to something that you don't want to. And go ahead and pause this again. So pause, that's my pause hands, I guess. And I'm gonna say, I know that I'm not speaking to anybody right now, so this is a bit weird, but in regards to what those feelings are, I know for me, if I say yes to something that I don't want to do, I usually feel upset, mad, angry, disappointed with myself, depending on what it is, for just not being clear, which I always go back to Brene Brown. She has a saying, clear is kind. If I don't say no to something that I want to, and then I have to go back and then say no later, I feel like I'm being more disruptive or inconvenient to that person than I wanted to be in the first place. And a big one that comes up for me, if I say yes to multiple things I don't want to do, or if I'm saying yes again and again when I continue to want to say no, is resentment. So resentment towards somebody that I usually really care about. Otherwise, I'm saying yes because I care about them. So yeah. So with that being said, okay, if we know that we're going to experience those feelings, if we know that saying yes in that moment doesn't align with what we really want, then why don't we say no? And usually that comes down to what in this book he refers to as the 3A trap. And we'll go through that. And know that I think what I really liked about this book too is he went through often what the difficulty in saying no is. It comes from wanting to balance, you love that relationship, you want to protect your relationship, you want to grow in that relationship, so you don't want to harm the other individual or disappoint them, and then exercising your own power. Sometimes it's hard for us to exercise our power, or if we're in a position where we might feel like we have more power over another individual, maybe we don't want to exert it, and we don't want them to feel like it's not an egalitarian relationship. So the 3 ways we approach the power versus relationship dilemma, which is the 3A trap. The first thing that we usually do is we accommodate. We say yes when we want to say no. In accommodation, I think for me, the feelings that I spoke to earlier very much reflect my accommodating. I used to, and I know I'm getting better at it. Again, it's like any muscle, any exercise, you have to work it in order to develop it, strengthen it, grow. So I know I'm getting better at this, but whenever I just don't want to disappoint the other individual, I don't want to hurt their feelings, I'll just say, yeah, absolutely. I can think of an example of even the other day, I had a friend who asked me if I wanted to go fishing, and I don't love fishing. And by saying I don't love it, I mean I don't like it, and fish gross me out, ew. Everyone's different though, and they wanted to go fishing, and it's a good way right now to stay 6 feet apart, do something together, be present together, and I just didn't want to do it. But I didn't want to hurt their feelings because I haven't seen them since the beginning of March or whenever this all started. So I said yes. And then I'll go into another A of then what I did, which doesn't help the situation at all. So another A of the 3 trap A is we attack. We say no poorly. I loved this quote from the book by Ambrose Bierce. Speak when you are angry and you'll make the best speech you will ever regret. And I think that's so true. And when we are speaking from a place of reacting, like maybe we're saying no in a terrible way, like we're yelling, we're saying, someone asks us to take out the trash, someone asks us to do a chore around the house, like a roommate or something, and you say, no, I'm not going to do it. I'm so tired of doing this. You always make me do this. I'm always the one to do this. Then that's not communicating in a healthy way. That would be violent communication, even by me using the term always and saying, you always make me do this. I'm shifting all the responsibility onto them, not taking any accountability by the fact that I've never set a boundary, that it's not something that I don't want to do. And when I say, when you use adverbs like always or never, those are essentially pretty much never true. And I use never in describing that, but yeah, like if you say you always do this, the chances are that that's just not accurate. Maybe they do it often or sometimes, but not usually always. So when we speak from a place of anger, when we speak from a place of fear, and we just say no in a way that damages the relationship, that can be really harmful. And then avoid. We maybe say nothing at all, or we make up an excuse. So that can look different ways. So in my fishing example, I said yes, and then they followed up with, okay, I'm available next Monday or Tuesday. And I just did not respond. And I acted like I got the text message like way later. And I was like, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. I don't know what happened. I don't even remember exactly what I said. But basically, I avoided until the day that we were supposed to fish together. And then I said something came up. And even by creating that excuse, that was avoiding too. And so I combined accommodate and avoid. And oftentimes what happens with these 3 A's is they operate together. They usually work in some kind of combo. Sometimes you start out by accommodating somebody. You continue to say, yeah, because you're not wanting to harm the relationship. And then you just get like so fed up to it. You get to a boiling point that you kind of explode on them. Or you keep saying yes, and then all of a sudden you just like fall off the radar. I think a good way to think of avoiding too, especially in regards to relationships, which I feel like we've seen an increase in people doing, is people ghosting. I think ghosting happens a lot more now than it ever did before because people feel like they have that choice. So especially if somebody met somebody through a dating app, or if somebody thinks that they're never going to have to like worry about running into this person in their friend circle, so they're just going to like fall off the radar completely. We see ghosting happen a lot. I hear about it a lot from our students, and ghosting is extremely painful for the party that's experiencing it. It feels, I know I'm speaking from myself, but this is what I've heard from students too, is it feels a lot worse than if someone were just to be direct and say, I am not interested. And, so I think it's important that we think about like, why do we do that instead of honoring that, okay, this is another human being, another individual, like let's give them the respect of giving them a positive no. And I think a lot of it comes from the reason why we don't is because we just don't have the practice, which again is why I think it's important to start being aware of how do the 3 A's work in your life? What are the A's that you go to? And when you have that awareness, how do you work to move towards saying a positive no versus using these 3 A's and saying yes to things that you don't want to say yes to? So the way out, how do you stop using these 3 A's? And the way out is by using a positive no. And if you're thinking, what the heck is a positive no? Well, we're going to break that down. So a positive no, how William Ury explains it, is a yes, no, yes. And that was my attempt at using actual punctuation marks. So the first yes is saying yes to yourself first. It's very internally focused. So when you are saying the first yes and thinking about it, that's not something that you're communicating to the other person unless you want to. So the first yes is thinking about what do I want to say yes to for myself? What are my interests? What are my values? And what are my core beliefs that I want to make sure I am, respecting? And so the power of your no is only as strong as the power of your yes. So you have to know what you are saying yes to for yourself so that it makes your no easier on you. I'm trying to think of an example. So, and again, I don't really like using personal examples too much, but I am because that's just the world that we're living in right now with having to record these. But I think about this one individual continued to like ask me out on dates, and at first I just kept going because I didn't want to say no. I was being accommodating, and yeah, I mean, it was nice. I really enjoyed spending time with him, and I saw them as a friend, but I did not have a romantic interest in them. And I didn't want, even for myself, to lose that friendship. And so I continued to accommodate, but the more I did it, the more, as we talked about earlier with self-actualization, I felt the incongruence in my life. I felt, okay, my external actions and what I'm doing here are not matching internally how I feel about this individual. And it's really starting to like take a toll because it doesn't align for myself. And so what I realized is, okay, what is my yes in this situation? And my yes is I want to say yes to genuine connection. I want to say yes to, I feel seen by this person. I feel heard by this person. And I really like respect them at the end of the day. And so I want to say yes to this friendship. And that's not solely my choice, but okay, so with saying yes to genuine connection, how can I say yes to genuine connection with also saying no to a romantic relationship? And so I had to realize, like, what are my interests here first? So after doing that, you have to say no. You have to assert your power, because we have to realize in life when we are going through these choices, when we are saying no to things, even when I use the example of the snooze, I have a choice in that moment. And I think sometimes it's easy to say, oh, I have to do this. I don't have a choice. It just has to be done. And that usually isn't the case. And I am speaking from a place of privilege in this instance of saying, let's assume your basic needs are being met. And I realize for a lot of people in academia, a lot of times if you have the privilege to be in academia, it might be a struggle to keep those basic needs met, but oftentimes they're somehow getting met. And I don't say that to minimize that that's not always the case. And even in places where your basic needs aren't met, you're still making choices every day. You're still having to say no to things, having to say yes to things. For people living in poverty, you're having to make choices of, am I going to say no to going to work today at my hourly job, or am I going to say no to going to get food stamps, or going to be in line for food stamps for however many hours, which makes me have to sacrifice my work day? And how does that impact my budget? And so everything, like, we are making so many choices every single day. And when we make choices, we are saying no to something, regardless of what it is. And when we think in our minds, when we change the way that we speak to ourselves, the way that we speak in general, from I have to I choose to, that can make a very powerful difference. Because when you say I choose to, I think it's easier to tie that back to what are your interests? Why are you choosing this over that? And so, like in the case of this romantic relationship proposition or whatever, when I was asserting my power, basically I was able to say, I was able to start out with my yes. I did want to express what my interests are. So I did say, I truly care about you. I feel like we have an amazing connection. And at the same time, I'm not feeling the romantic connection here. And so what I want is moving into this third bullet point, what I want and what I'm hoping for is that we can continue our connection, continue our friendship, and continue to develop our relationship in an authentic way, but at a friendship level. How do you feel about that? And the way that that kind of segues into that third point is say yes to further your relationship is I just asserted my power by saying the no, I don't want a romantic relationship, but then I am including them and saving them some face, putting some more power back into their hands by saying, this is what I want. How do you feel about this? And that gives us an opportunity to explore further. What are their feelings? What feelings have I caused? And while saying no sometimes can feel like it's going to drive a relationship away, like especially in this scenario, okay, I'm essentially rejecting this person. So they could choose to not want to take a break, not talk to me anymore. And that's their right and that's their choice. And that can be really scary for me as an individual, but it's a risk that I'm willing to take because my internal interest and my external actions are not aligning, and it's causing just a lot of internal conflict for me. So when you're saying yes, it's giving them back, like saying, I care about you, I want to hear your voice too. And that can help your relationship continue to grow in a very authentic way. And when I was thinking about the saying no to assert your power to, I do think about a lot of times when we change our language from that I have to I choose to. Another example I can think of is I've worked with students who have wanted me to maybe call their parents and say, oh, so-and-so has to do this, or so-and-so, I'm thinking of a specific example, say so-and-so has to live on campus this semester because it's just required, because there was a lot of family conflict going on in terms of, okay, you're not required to live on campus, I want you to live at home, otherwise we're not going to financially support you. And that's really, really hard, right? To think about, okay, if I live on campus, I'm giving up that financial support, and that's a decision that has to be made. But I can't do that for the student. No, that's not true. I could lie to that student's parents if I wanted to risk losing my job, losing my source of income, having to potentially worry about my bills and my sustainability of life. And no, it's not that I can't do it for the student. It's that as much as I want to support the student, I'm going to think of other ways how we can navigate this together, because I choose to say no in this scenario. I'm not going to lie to your parents because I want to keep my job. And that is my underlying yes to myself of, I want to keep my job. I want to keep my income. That is the source of my no. And when we can tie our no's back to what are we saying yes to, it can make it so much easier to say no in an authentic way. Okay, so I kind of want to wrap this up. Really today we're only talking about and kind of diving into the first couple of chapters of this book. So if you like thinking about any of this stuff, know that he goes into much greater detail about how to uncover your yes, how to say no, and all that good stuff. But now let's go ahead and talk about how do you discover what is your underlying yes to yourself. I got this picture from the movie Yes Man. If you haven't seen it, I love it. I think it's so great. I think it's a great example of, not living your life in extremes and those always or never. You don't want to always say yes when someone asks you to do something. You want to have that healthy boundary of, okay, well, what are your interests? And in this movie, he goes from, the essential premise is he goes from saying no to everything that anybody ever wants to do with him. He doesn't want to try new things. He's comfortable. He likes watching his movies. this movie was like older, so he would go to Blockbuster and just check out movies, hang out by himself. And so he was saying no to a lot of experiences. And then he went to the seminar, gets like tapped in the head, like some chanting happens, and then he starts saying yes to like everything. And initially it starts adding so much value to his life, but then the things that he's saying yes to aren't bringing him joy anymore, and they're not like developing his relationships anymore. And so this movie is about finding the balance between saying yes and saying no. And so it's a really great movie. I would recommend it for anybody. So the way to uncover your yes is by first just being proactive. You want to know, okay, what are my underlying interests? So even by doing the work on your own and figuring out what are your core values, which we're actually going to be talking about next week, by doing that work on your own, it makes it easier in the moment to find your underlying interests, your desires, and your wants. And when we are proactive, when we are actually really intentionally thinking about what are our interests, why are we saying yes, and we are less relying on our emotions, then that gives us power back in the moment too. If we react, which can just look like if someone asks you to do something, you're like, oh yeah, sure. But we haven't actually thought about how that impacts our lives, our days, our weeks, then that usually has negative consequences if we haven't truly thought about it. And so when we give ourselves a moment, even like 10 seconds to just pause and think about, okay, how does saying yes to this impact me? Then we give ourselves the space to recognize what emotions will come up for us when we say yes. And so I really enjoyed a way that William Ury had explained it. He talked about don't react from your emotional place. So acknowledge what emotions are coming up for you. Acknowledge what emotions you believe that you're going to experience if you say yes. And think about it as you are watching yourself having that conversation with somebody. So you're like literally on the balcony or peering through a window and watching yourself have this conversation. So I'm trying to think of another example. Let's say like your boss says, hey, I've had something come up. I know that you weren't on the schedule to work this weekend, but I have this family event, and so I was really hoping that you could cover for me. Or like a colleague says that. If it's a colleague, or even if it's a boss, maybe you want to give them a good impression. You want to be a team player if it's a colleague. You just want to be seen as somebody who's dependable and reliable. So all those things are going through your head. You also had already made plans with your friends and you just worked 5 days in a row. So you were really looking forward to having this time off. Both of those things can exist at the same time. And so in that moment, just thinking about what emotions are going to come up for you if you say yes, if you accommodate, what's going to come up for you? Are you going to resent your boss for being at their family event and you were supposed to be with your friends and now you're not? Are you going to feel happy because you are seen as that team player? Your boss like really appreciates it and that makes you feel good because you've helped out in some way. Like, how are you going to feel about saying yes? And when you go to the balcony in this scenario, when you just think about watching yourself have this conversation and what it looks like, it can give you that space and that outsider perspective of like, okay, this is how I'm going to feel if I say yes to this, and this is how I'm going to feel if I say no. So go ahead and give yourself that moment. And sometimes giving yourself that moment may look like saying, boss, colleague, Sarah, whatever, I definitely want to think about if I have the capacity to take that on. So can I get back to you in an hour? Can I get back to you in 15 minutes? However long you need. But taking a time out can help too, because it can help you gather your thoughts. If you haven't maybe been able to do as much proactive interest work, value work, then if you need to explore like, what are my interests in this scenario, it just gives you some time. And then for uncovering your yes, you want to keep asking yourself, why? And in this scenario, it's like, why am I saying no? Why do I want to say no? Why do I not want to make plans for that FaceTime? Why do I not want to commit to this meeting? Why do I not want to hang out with this person anymore? Why do I want to cut them out of my lives? You have to be thinking about what are your whys. Why do I not want to go to the movies tonight? Sometimes it's like I just don't want to hang out with these people, and sometimes it's I don't literally have the finances to, or if I go to the movies tonight, I have to sacrifice this amount of food or whatever. Sorry. So you want to go back to what are your whys? And beyond acknowledging what are your interests in the moment, you also want to think about, okay, yes, you have these desires, but what are your basic needs? Often your interests still behind those are your underlying needs. And the 5 most common ones are safety and survival, food, drink, and other life's necessities, belonging and love, respect and meaning, freedom and control over one's fate. So if somebody is asking you to cover a shift for them, you might not want to because you already have plans. And you might not want to because overall you think, you know, based on your historic history with this person, they have really not respected your time to your weekends. Maybe you've accommodated however many times, you've already helped them out so much, and whenever you ask them for help, like they're not helping you. And that makes you feel like they don't respect your personal life, your work-life balance. And so just kind of, I mean, it all is very individual. And so you have to know what are your values, your needs, your desires in order to really be rooted in your yes. And I didn't talk about this earlier, but this picture on the left is from the book. So your first yes, the yes is the roots. The roots are what gives the no the strength. It's the support behind the no. And your no can only be as strong as the roots. Your no is not going to be strong if you only have like one root hanging in there by a thread. I mean, we've all seen trees like that you're like, oh, that tree is just never going to last. Your no will not last if you do not know what you're grounded in, what your yes is. And so I just really appreciate that visual. I think it's really helped me. I know even just like right after reading this, I had a couple scenarios come up where I had somebody ask me something and I had to say no. And just knowing what my interests are and going back to like, what am I saying yes to myself helped me so much in being able to say no. So yeah, so that's kind of all the time that we have for today. But I'm really thankful if you watched this. I hope that you took something away from it. And just know that it's okay to say yes to yourself. You deserve to follow what your heart wants. You deserve to align who you are externally, who you present to the world with who you are internally. You deserve to live an authentic life. And the more that you live an authentic life, you will feel better and people will see it in you. People will be able to tell that you're being genuine. And when people are genuine, we just kind of naturally have a higher level of respect for them, and we see them in a more positive way because we know that they're being authentic with us. And it's just like something you can sense. I know that most of the mentors I have, whether they are authors, whether they are on TV, whether they are colleagues, supervisors, my family, most of the people that I have always looked up to in life have always been kind of going towards the self-actualization, have always been getting to a place that they are living a more authentic life, and they are saying no to things. They are saying yes to themselves, and it's something that we should be able to appreciate about each other, and it's something that when someone gives us a no, we should accept it with grace. And so if this was helpful for you in any way, know that next week and in the future, I'm going to have a video and we're going to have a group on uncovering, okay, what are your values? Because today I referenced interest and values a lot, but okay, let's deeper dive into what that actually looks like. If you have any questions, any topics you want to discuss ever, know that I am here to listen. It's your time, and I want to respect that, and I want you to get the most out of it. So you can always contact me, and thank you so much.